Ukrainian Neptune missiles and Bars drones struck several strategic targets on Russian territory. This information was confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Last night in Taganrog, Rostov region, the Beriev Aircraft Repair Plant and the Atlant Aero UAV manufacturing facility were hit. Explosions and large-scale fires were reported there. During the strike on the plant, the experimental A-60 aircraft and equipment for Russian strategic aviation were likely damaged. Ukrainian defenders also struck an oil terminal in Novorossiysk and an oil refinery in Tuapse, Krasnodar Krai. Oil equipment and an S-400 air defense missile launcher were damaged. The extent of the damage is being clarified. Border guards, drone operators from the Steel Border Brigade destroyed an enemy robotic ground complex, a shelter, and 4 Russian occupiers in the Kursk and North Slobozhansky directions. In addition, in this area, Ukrainian defenders repelled 2 Russian attacks. In the Lyman direction, the Russian army attacked near the settlements of Zarechnoy, Stavki, and Lyman. The enemy also tried to advance in the Konstantinovka direction, in the areas of Plasheivka, Sherbinovka, Rusanov Yar, Sofievka, and Novopavlovka. And in the Pokrovsk direction, Russian occupiers unsuccessfully tried to push Ukrainian defenders from their positions in the areas of Volnoye, Krasny Liman, Rodinskaye, Mirnograd, and Udachneye.
If there are this many active combat operations, it means they're being carried out not only by the Russians, but also by our side. We're shooting something too. The question is, where do we get shells, bullets, and everything we need to fight if nothing can be delivered? Are there some secret warehouses there, or some secret factories that produce all this? Obviously. Well, it's a simple question, and it immediately puts everything in order in your head. We're conducting active combat operations using a large number of drones, shells, weapons, everything necessary to wage war, and yet everything is blocked off, and nothing can be delivered. So how? Something about this. Something just doesn't add up, right? Maybe it's still possible to deliver things after all. It's difficult, but it's possible.
Russian forces are trying to cut off land routes between Pokrovsk and Mirnograd in order to encircle the city. According to the 7th Air Assault Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the enemy is assaulting the northern part of Mirnograd with small infantry groups and using drones to adjust their movements. Ukrainian armed forces are reinforcing their grouping in the city to defend the southern outskirts, where the enemy is trying to amass manpower for further attacks. In the Donetsk region, drone pilots from the Phoenix unit of the border guards destroyed 2 of the latest Russian electronic warfare systems, BlackEye. This is a modern technology capable of jamming both reconnaissance UAVs and FPV drones on different frequencies. Experts consider this system extremely dangerous, which is why it's important that Ukrainian defenders manage to destroy several of these electronic warfare units at once. The enemy is also trying to advance in the direction of Kostiantinivka. However, pilots from the border unit Phoenix continue to detect and eliminate small Russian infantry groups in forest belts and shelters, as well as strike their logistics.
Plans to capture Donetsk region, well, to capture Mirnograd, Pokrovsk, Kostiantinovka. In their combat orders, well, every combat operation is carried out according to combat orders that are prepared, and each unit receives its assignment, what they must do and how to do it. So these combat orders, well, the so-called BRs, combat orders in Ukrainian, they've already been rewritten for the winter. I can't give you the exact date right now, and even for the summer of next year. In other words, they fully understand that they still don't have enough forces and resources to break through our defenses.
The losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine have exceeded 1,168,000 military personnel. These figures were announced by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Just in the past day, the Defense Forces eliminated 980 Russian occupiers. They also destroyed 4 tanks, 1 armored vehicle, 44 artillery systems, 2 air defense systems, as well as 125 units of enemy automotive and special equipment.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine recorded 147 combat engagements on the front line in the past day. The Russian army is advancing most actively in 5 directions. In the Slavyansk sector, the Defense Forces repelled 11 enemy assaults. In the Alexandrovsk sector, 13, and in the Guliaipol sector, 15 and 18. The Russian occupiers launched attacks in the Konstantinovka direction. In the Pokrovsk sector, units of the Russian army tried to break through Ukrainian defenses 46 times.
Russian troops continue to attempt assault operations in the Kupiansk direction. The enemy is trying to advance toward Kupiansk-Uzlovy and push Ukrainian forces beyond the Oskil River. According to fighters from the Beriev Brigade, the attacks are mostly carried out in bad weather, since the foggy rain makes aerial observation difficult. The Russians move in small groups and try to slip between Ukrainian positions. However, most of them are destroyed, and the wounded retreat. On this section of the front, the Russian army periodically changes tactics, combining massive assaults with intense shelling, as well as using various types of drones. And
Next, we will talk with our guest. Joining us now is Mykola Malomuzh, General of the Ukrainian Army and head of Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service from 2005 to 2010. Hello, Mykola Higorovich.
greetings to you.
Greetings. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to heroes.
Lori. But before we move on to discussing the situation at the front, I would like to draw the attention of our viewers and yours to the fact that satellite images have emerged that confirm the destruction by Ukraine's defense forces of Russian aircraft, specifically the Il-76 and the A-60, which is a carrier of laser weaponry. This has been confirmed by the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Mader-Brovdi. These aircraft were previously located at the Beriev Aircraft Repair Plant in Taganrog, Rostov region. How would you assess this catch? As I understand it, the A-60, I think that's the second and now the last one destroyed on Russian territory. It was also called the laser weapon carrier. Well, you know, Star Wars, the propagandists were saying it could, I don't know, be used for that. And how do you evaluate this? We understand that it didn't actually conduct any... Let's put it this way. Actions by the Russian army against Ukraine. But nevertheless, it's important. And in what way would you like to hear your thoughts?
Well, Russia, especially Putin, always presents new weapons, for example, the Oreshnik, or new, so to speak, submarines that supposedly have super capabilities and use that to scare the world. And at this point, they've repeatedly claimed to have laser weapons and that these are mounted on aircraft, on mobile platforms, but nowhere have they actually demonstrated their effectiveness yet. And that's why we're talking about this plane as an experimental model. They themselves called it that, meaning they're conducting tests. This weapon and the strikes delivered right at the moment of its preparation and testing. These are precisely the kind of strikes that can destroy almost the entire intellectual component, as well as, of course, the technical equipment that supports it. This is very important in that regard. Even any developments, whether successful or not, are preempted and prevented from being used on the front lines. So there are two aspects to this. On one hand, it's the destruction of the prototype itself, including the aircraft and the infrastructure. And the second point is the blow to Putin's own prestige, since he had already been promoting for over a year that this weapon would be used in the coming months. That's why I think such strikes, like the ones we've carried out on other targets, on the Saratov airfields, for example, against aircraft that had radar or system control capabilities covering half of Europe. This shows that, for now, we have good intelligence and the ability to strike with precision weapons.
Nikolai Grigorovich, turning to the situation at the front, we previously provided information about the number of clashes, the losses of the Russian Federation's army, the situation around Kupiansk, and the situation around Pokrovsk. But I'd like to ask you about this from a particular angle, Nikolai Grigorovich. Everyone keeps talking about these peace negotiations, right? And now NBC News is reporting that during contacts with the Ukrainian side, the U.S. Secretary of the Army, Daniel Driscoll, but he described a very grim outlook for Ukraine, thus pushing the Ukrainian side toward, let's say, more radical steps to sign the necessary agreements and, let's say, to agree on the points we've been discussing lately. Nikolai Grigorovich, what is your take on this? If we're talking about certain forecasts, which they're trying to use to scare us...
First and foremost, we see very systematic pressure coming from Russia. They are currently using various operational channels to actively push, first and foremost, former President Donald Trump and his team to put significant pressure on our country, Just last night, there were clear and unmistakable publications regarding the ongoing negotiations between Ushakov and Dmitriev, as well as between Vitkov and Ushakov, about the details of the Russian plan. The so-called peace plan for settlement was prepared in Moscow, then translated automatically into English without any edits, and submitted as an American plan. And remember, even Trump said, accept it urgently within a week, otherwise they will basically stop supporting Ukraine. And then remember, for him, it would be a political and strategic failure. When it wasn't accepted, it still needed further work, so he sent a more moderate version, so that active work could begin on each point and on Ukraine's interests. But today he said again, yes, it's nothing, it's been made public, these recordings, but it's all just bargaining, how to sell out Russia and Ukraine and so on. That's the kind of absurd format we're dealing with. But what's the answer? What are they begging on? It's what Trump himself said today, that Russia is advancing, seizing new territories. There's no way out. We have to make concessions because another 50 to 60,000 will be sent to the Donetsk front. So it's better to reach an agreement now, peacefully, and avoid those casualties. But the most important factor, the reason Putin can't do anything and no arguments for this plan work, is that we're holding the front and the enemy has no tactical successes anywhere. Yes, there are tough sections of the front, and he is advancing in several sectors. In 6 directions by 300 to 500 meters up to a kilometer. Some are pushing toward Pokrovsk, Constantinople, but they've been pushed back. Just like they've repeatedly talked about Kramatorsk, about Kupiansk especially, as if they've already been captured. So basically, Putin wants to present it as if he's advancing. These cities have already been repeatedly declared by Russia as being under their control, as if he's advancing, so they're saying we should agree now to the plan that Russia is pushing through mechanisms of pressure on the US and then using the Americans to put pressure on us. But it's not working. Putin doesn't know what to do. At the same time, he starts striking peaceful cities. After all, this Scandinavian-style work along the front and the terrorist strikes against our population are meant, so to speak, to force us into carrying out the Russian Federation's plan. And the second point is operational work. Through Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and through Mitkov, that is Dmitry, who is carrying out accordingly an operational function. He is now working as an agent for Putin and Trump's inner circle, including his closest associates and even relatives. And this work is being carried out in a military format as well. That's why Driscoll came to Kyiv with the aim of exerting pressure with these same plans. Accordingly, he is now trying to coordinate this with the Russians and then, of course, continue to put pressure on Abudanov there. Abu Dhabi, where they are now, Abudanov actually went there for operational negotiations with Russia. I wouldn't have brought up this topic, but it's already been reported that Abudanov is there, meeting with the Russians. Even if there is some need for operational contact in Ukraine's interests, it would never be made public. Well, they've already said that he's there now, and that some negotiations are taking place. Negotiations should only be conducted, so to speak, in Ukraine's interests, on any platform. We see that Driscoll will be returning to Ukraine again, after negotiations with the Russian side. So this will be more pressure again, because, you see, the mood is very tough. We need to work first and foremost across all sectors. It's not just 3 to 5 people, but several hundred who have influence over Trump. For example, I know personally I have repeatedly changed my position to a pro-Ukrainian one, both during that period and now. It was no accident that 3 months ago he changed his position to a pro-Ukrainian one, stating that he was ready to supply Tomahawks. That was, so to speak, an active work against Russia. A different position was forming within Trump's inner circle. This is pressure through Ilya Sovetnikov, through Rubio, through the military, especially Congress, the Senate, HOCUS, and accordingly the Ukrainian Congresses, which actively support us. Through the military as well. In other words, active work, not waiting for Russia to submit these plans to the US and only then for the US to announce them and put pressure on us. And for us, we need to have hundreds of people in America, people who have contacts in every sector, and they can put pressure on Trump, shaping a position of support. And the front must be held so that we have arguments, like they love to say, Trump is a trump card against Russia.
Attempts by the Russians to gain a foothold with heavy equipment in Pokrovsk have not been successful. even though in recent days the enemy has been actively moving tanks and armored personnel carriers. This was reported by the 155th Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after Anna of Kiev. They also published a video showing Ukrainian defenders destroying such equipment south of Pokrovsk. Ukraine's defense forces are expanding the so-called depth zone even beyond the zero line. Dozens of Russian tanks, armored vehicles, buggies, and motorcycles are being turned into scrap metal. To what extent are such political issues discussed? And is this specific question addressed? The situation at the front, especially in Pokrovsk, because it is currently in the spotlight.
These are exactly the kinds of operations our forces are carrying out. Our assault units, especially Special Operations Forces, the SBU, the Main Intelligence Directorate, as well as the 7th and other corps that are conducting clearing operations. Successful operations like these should be showcased on any negotiation platform, demonstrating how we are clearing the area, how effectively we are working against the enemy, against large formations, against armored vehicles, against drones with strikes, like the one on Taganrog, and strikes on oil refineries. Showcase our comprehensive actions. I'm talking here about the substance of negotiations with our American and other counterparts, showing them that we are advancing. Show how they are advancing. And I would simply show that the Russian army, remember, on the 24th, in February 2022, they had 750,000 troops in active combat service. Now, we've eliminated 1,167,000 of them. So that's actually 500,000 more than they had at the start of the war. That's how you need to show how they're winning, in quotes. Then you'll have a different picture. But I'll say this directly. Push this on Trump and on the whole so-called elite that influences Trump every single day. I know him. He changes his position, like once or twice a day. Maybe about the Ukrainian opposition and also about the Russian one. So how do you make sure he's a consistent ally? You have to work at it constantly, keep at it daily with all the different influence groups. That'll give the front uninterrupted support.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.